1, 2.
Thank you, Stephen, or thank you, Steve. We're going to go back to Stephen here. Okay, I'm calling to order the Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, May 13th at 4 p.m. Roll call, Joe.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Chris. You're muted, Chris, but I saw you wave your hand. Rob.
Here.
Jeremy.
Here.
Thank you. I am now opening it for public comment. And closing it for public comment. Okay, we have 2 minutes that Steve had sent to us, April 10th and May 1st, 2025. Is there any changes to either of those minutes? And seeing none, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I second.
Okay, made by Peter, seconded by Joe. Roll call again. Joe?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Thank you. Those are approved. Okay, so review and discussion of airport fuel revolver increase. Warren Maria, nice to see you on the, for people who haven't met Warren yet, he's the new airport manager and we all know Maria. So I don't, is Brian on yet, Steve?
He is
Sam.
not.
He is not. Okay, well then, Warren and Maria, over to you, or Susan. I don't care who starts, so.
Madam Chair, if you want to, I can start and maybe hopefully with Brian will jump. I'm assuming he just running a couple minutes late.
Yeah, that's fine. And
Steve, do you want to share your screen?
Sure. You
Okay.
want the presentation?
Yeah, please.
First, thank you so much for taking this request and meeting with us and reviewing this agenda item today. Since we are getting so close to our spending limit in the fuel revolver, and I'm going to put a note for next fiscal year to send this request much earlier for your review. As every year, we set up a spending limit on our fuel revolver, which we use to purchase all fuel. And as of last town meeting, we set it up for this fiscal year, 2025, at $6 million. We are here today to ask for your approval and increase it to $8.5 million. As every year during this time, we review what we have purchased until date and then what we anticipate to purchase until the end of the fiscal year. So we have enough money in our expense line item to purchase enough fuel until the end of the year. And I wasn't going to go over each slide of the presentation. It's pretty much the same every year. Some of the language is actually set up from the previous airport manager as well. I saw Brian is online right now as well. If you have any particular questions or if you want me to review any more of the slides, please let me know. Or if Brian wants to add something.
Actually, Maria, it's not so many slides, and I think it's helpful for the committee members who haven't been on the committee as long as some of the others to, if you could just quickly go through them. You don't have to spend too much time on them, but they were good slides, so you might as well get use out of them. So,
Brian, do you want to take over? Do you want me to try to go over the slides?
You can go over them. I mean, this for the committees, I'll just quickly weigh in. This is, we've done this a couple years in a row. It's authorized under the revolving fund language, provided we have the support of both the FinCom and a meeting and the select board, which we're going to tomorrow night. It's routine that they estimate what they need, and we have successfully raised it the last couple of fiscal years. So I'll let you go through the rest of the slides, Maria, though.
Okay, so with all members, we know we have our revolving fund that we purchase and we purchase all our fuel from there. We probably not that many airports have their own fuel farm, and we try to predict how much we need as a spending limit every year. And after I kept it the same. So last year was at town meeting $6 million approved at annual town meeting. And we are anticipating in next fiscal year to try to do a better job and increase it earlier in the year than waiting May or June to do that. Currently, the cap is set up to $6 million, and after careful consideration, how many more deliveries of fuel we have and what we currently have purchased until date, we would like to increase that cap to $8.5 million. This, the fuel revolver, it's our primary source of revenue here at the airport. In fiscal 24, we budgeted $2 million, which is 18% of our budgeted revenue. In fiscal 25, it's 2.2, and in the next fiscal year, we have budgeted $2.4 million, which again is 18% of our budgeted revenue. There are some myths and some reality regarding the fuel revolver. The number one myth is that the airport wants to sell more fuel, but the fuel supply is already constrained. Yes, Joe, do you have a question?
When you say 2.4 million is 18% of budgeted revenue, that's airport revenue, correct?
Yes, only our enterprise budgeted revenue for this year, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared really to talk about it, but I forgot to mention that our additional revenue above our budget and fuel revolver funds, we usually use to pay off some of our debt or our short-term borrowing. We also use it to fund some of our capital projects. Right now, as of date, we've spent around $8.5 million on PFAS, and we've been using our only funds to fund both of the articles we have approved. And most of this revenue is coming from the overflow from the fuel revolver. And going back to the myths and reality, we have set up markup on our fuel that we kind of change 4 times a year. So the airport always wants to sell more fuel, but it really doesn't work that way. It doesn't mean that we have increased jets every year, and most of the time, what it means is that we just fall. It depends from the market and the fuel right now and the price of the fuel. We try to stay consistent with our markup, and it's always the same. Over the winter time, it's $4. Then it goes up to $4.25, and then in the summertime, during our busiest 3 months of the year, goes to $4.50. And that's the formula we've been following for many, many years. High fuel prices cause high ticket prices. The fuel is discounted for year-round providers. We've been working with World Fuel for many, many years, and they've been giving us a really good price on our fuel for being their client. And this is really, again, based on the current market and how much in general the fuel is being sold at. And everybody seems to think that the JetBlue takes the most fuel because they have the most flights, but that's actually not true. From all 5 commercial airlines, American Airlines is the one that is taking the more fuel and is purchasing the most. We assume that because their flights are the farthest points. Most of the flights are coming from Chicago, and JetBlues are more closer flights. Most of them are from New York, or they'll fly up to Boston, etc. We have some statistic on the next slide that they kind of talk about themselves, but 30% of our revenue, total fuel revenue, is coming from our commercial airlines, and 70% from the general aviation, which is our FBO or private jets. On the next slide, I have the amount of anticipated deliveries until the end of the year. For May and June, we anticipate another 58 deliveries. This is based on numbers from last year, plus added 4 additional deliveries just in case it gets busier, or there's some other things that happen at the airport, and we just want to make sure that we have enough fuel. The next slide just shows how we came up with the 8.5 request for increase of the fuel revolver. Our purchases as of April 30th are $5.8 million. And then we add the anticipated fuel purchases from the previous slide, and we came to 7.8. And from there, we add a buffer of 678,000, just in case. Again, we just want to be conservative and make sure we always have enough fuel, and we're never going to run out of fuel. And that's how we came up with the increase of $8.5 million. And Joe, I saw you have your hand raised as well.
Do you ever pay this revolver down to zero?
Do we ever, I'm sorry, what
Pay it
do we
down
ever?
to zero. You said you use it for a bunch of other things as well as fuel, right?
No, it's only for fuel. We might use the money from the fuel revolver to fund some of our capital projects as a funding source. Or anywhere else it might be needed, but this would need annual town meeting approval.
And do you ever pay it down to zero or not?
Brian, please.
Yeah. So, the 6 million or the 8.5 million that we hope that you will help us get authorized is the cap on spending. So it doesn't work in reverse to go down to zero, Joe. It's the amount that they can actually expend to pay for fuel, or the fuel revolver also has does authorize repairs to the fuel farm. And after the audit is certified on a fiscal year basis, the retained earnings in that fund are available to be transferred if the airport commission wishes to at a annual town meeting. So it never goes to zero because they are limited on an annual basis without town meeting approval for a retained earnings transfer or fund balance transfer to expend 8.5 million.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Peter? You're muted, Peter.
There I am. Hi, Maria. Thank
Hi,
you,
Peter.
Denise. Do you have the numbers handy that show what your total sales percent increase of fuel and in dollars, gallons and in dollars, year to date?
Over last year, you mean?
Yeah, from last year to today, what percent are the dollars up and what percent are the gallons up?
I did not calculate that. I can definitely get you that information, but I looked at based in money year over year, and it was about $1.2 million more than last fiscal year, the prior fiscal year. And
Okay,
I can definitely look it up and then give you more information about the gallons.
okay. I was just interested, but thank you.
Good. Thank you, Maria. Jeremy?
Sorry, I had to unmute. All right, so if I understand this, Brian, the 6 million may be growing to 8.5 as a catch-all. And at the end of the year, the airport commission could pay it all down, but it's really a line of credit from the town. So it's
Has nothing to do with the town whatsoever. The money is, the fuel revolver is solely fuel sales by the airport. And we established a revolver probably 10 years ago or 15 years ago as a way to be able to view and understand the cost of the fuel, and the revenue overflow goes into their normal operating budget above the cap. So if we raise the cap to $8.5 million, every dollar over 8.5 million goes into the airport operating fund budget and then gets certified as retained earnings if it's above what they had budgeted on an annual basis. This never gets spent to zero because they have the retained earnings, and they would never spend it to the retained earnings to zero. That's not something that I don't believe. I don't want to speak for the future, but it's not something I think we would ever support or recommend.
All right, well, back to the usage. We simply, your supplier of aviation fuel, how many days do we have to pay him?
Maria, is it net 30 with a discount at net 10?
Net 30.
Okay,
Yes.
and then when we make our sales to commercial or to general aviation, is it cash on the barrelhead? How does that work?
Maria will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe don't most of them have, well, the private people have a card down that, or some type of payment on file that they can charge, correct, Maria?
Credit card, mostly credit cards. Everybody has their credit card on file, yeah.
But do we bill American directly?
We do bill American directly. We do bill all commercial airlines directly, yes.
And what are our terms to that? 30 days as well?
30 days, yes.
All right, so we have positive working capital of roughly 30 days, 28 days to sales for the private aircraft industry. And we have an even up of days on that we have to pay versus what we collect on the general aviation. So that says that as we grow, we're in a positive working capital position, I believe. And so I'm trying to understand, why do we need this increase? And then additively, I'm a little confused because sometimes you say it's only used to purchase fuel. And then I hear that it's maybe also used to improve certain capital expenditures. And then in some of these slides, there was something confusing about PFAS. So I'm sorry, I'm a little just confused.
Okay, so here's the thing. At annual town meeting every year, a revolving fund has a cap that is set by the annual town meeting. That cap is the statutory legal authority to expend. The airport at the present moment has hit the $6 million cap. If they need fuel, there is no way for them to spend out of the revolving fund because they have no legal authority to pay another penny over $6 million, as the cap was set at last year's annual town meeting. Okay, they can, if they believe they're going to be under the cap for fuel purchases, the revolving fund is allowed to be used for repair and maintenance to the fuel farm itself in the language. So they can spend $6 million on fuel sales and repairs or maintenance of the fuel farm itself on an annual basis, as approved by annual town meeting.
So Brian, if I could restate what I think I've just heard, this revolving fund is not like a bank line of credit or revolving credit. It's a municipal metric of approximating how much business the airport can do.
And how much business they can pay for out of this revolving fund.
Okay, so it's not really a line of credit. It's just it's a municipal metric on this business. Okay.
Yes. And then at an annual town meeting, Jeremy, after an audit is done, if they have surplus, like it's in Maria, can you go back to the slide? Yes. So the projection in this is that if we raise the cap to 8.5 million, they're going to expend, they believe, 7.8 million of the $8.5 million in the cap. They will collect $8.5 million in revenue, okay, in the cap, because because we have to have the money to spend. The fuel revolver will have $8.5 million in revenue in it. At year end, that would leave a balance of $678,000, Jeremy, in this example here, okay? Once the audit is completed, if there was a zero balance, when the audit is completed and there's certified fund balance of $678,000, the airport commission does have the legal authority to request annual town meeting to appropriate that from the fund balance in the fuel revolver to any lawful project that they wish to expend it on. And over the years, as Maria has noted, if there has been a surplus because the fuel costs were different or whatever, they had better purchasing power, whatever the case may be, they have used the fund balance as authorized by annual town meeting to help offset borrowing costs or fund some of the PFAS work, along with the retained earnings from their general operating budget.
I get it. So Brian, maybe this is not an arcane municipal metric, but it seems that this is you certainly never see anything like this in the private sector.
Well, the
What
private
is the,
sector doesn't need town meeting to do everything, so you would never see this in there.
but it's a measurement device to provide control for purposes that I'm afraid I'm just not certain as to what they are. But it is what it is, I guess.
It was put in place to better identify fuel costs and to try to estimate them and work through it. And it's generally worked very well. The airport has historically kind of set it at a range that they believe. And obviously as fuel sales rise and they estimate they have more sales than they are authorized to pay for, we have to come back and ask because, so.
Yeah. So let me ask one last question of you, Brian, on this. I guess you mentioned that there are constraints to selling more fuel. I would, one, love to know what those are. And secondly, with our commercial customers, one might think that the tax burden of buying fuel on Nantucket would be less than at LaGuardia Airport or in Boston. But has anyone ever looked into why commercial doesn't want to buy more fuel from us as opposed to, the FBOs in LaGuardia or in Boston? Because we'll make money off of it.
I have never done that level of detail because that really resides with the airport.
Okay.
Chris?
Yeah, sorry, I'll try to be super quick. Brian, as much as I would miss the annual fuel revolver raising meeting, is the reason to not set the estimate much higher just because it's a pain to get the surplus out?
I think the largest reason to not set it significantly higher, Chris, is the fact that the airport does rely on some overflow into their budget. And if we set it too high, and
that's my point, then you need town
Yeah.
meeting to get it out. They can't just grab it.
yeah,
right?
you can, it's more difficult to do I don't even know if there's a provision to actually, after the fact, reduce the authorization for the revolving fund. So we've taken the approach to set it at a reasonable number at 6. Maybe we could set it a little higher. And then if we do need more, then we go back. But it would be very difficult if they budgeted for overflow and we set this at 8.5 or 9 million and we didn't reach it, then they have nothing, then that's a shortfall in their operating
Right,
budget.
they
And
missed their margin, okay.
It seems like it's a
Fine.
control mechanism for a large sloshing in and out of funds at a semi-independent entity.
it is a mechanism to try to control the potential impacts of fuel sales on their budget, because one thing that should be noted is the other option, rather than raising it, would be simply to charge it against their operating budget, but they have no budgeted line item for fuel sales of this magnitude, so it would be a devastating hit to their bottom line, which is so that is your control mechanism, Joe. It's limiting the impact on their bottom line and their operating budget.
And just to correct, can you go back to the slide where it shows how much fuel you're going to buy in May and June estimated? So I think it's pretty simple. They've spent the 6 million that they were authorized in ATM 2024. They've almost spent it. They still have another 2 million that they're expecting to sell. They need the money to buy the fuel. And so therefore, they're looking for it to be increased. It's that simple. The purchases are purchases of fuel of 5.8 million. It's not purchases of other things, correct, Brian?
That's absolutely correct.
And so I think it's pretty straightforward. And it's been very helpful to understand some of the other further details. Maria and Brian, thanks for sharing that. Are there any further questions before I'm looking for a motion? Joanna?
I'm happy to make the motion. The other thing that I wanted to say to answer one of Jeremy's questions, at some point in time, I believe that we were also, it was also explained to us about the selling of more fuel, is that the airplanes, when they come and go, can only have a certain amount of fuel on them because of the length of the runway and the trips that they're making, and that's not a way to increase revenue. So at least that was, I think, at one point an explanation, but I'm happy to move to approve.
And I will second.
Okay, made by Joanna, seconded by Jeremy. Any further discussions on the motion before I go to roll call? Okay, Joe,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
Welcome back, Rob. And Warren, do you want to come on camera for a minute to say hi to everybody? Because I don't know if you met them all at town meeting.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge Maria and give her a big shout out. You know, she kind of was put Johnny on the spot there, but she did a fantastic job in really explaining just in reference to the airport and the fuel revolver. And just to kind of, like I said, just reiterate that, you know, as we'd mentioned before, those myths that there's more private jets coming, there's not. They're just getting bigger aircraft. I mean, we're going from these smaller Cessna Citations now to these Global 6000s, these G6s, G7s, which are a lot larger aircraft. They now fly 6,000 miles in a distance. You can practically go from Nantucket to Hong Kong now direct on that one that one type aircraft, which has gotten a lot larger. And so, of course, it handles more fuel, even though the planes haven't, the number of planes haven't increased. Our annual employments have actually stayed very, very steady year over year. It's just they're getting bigger and they take in more fuel on those aircraft's wings. And like I said, that myth that JetBlue takes on more fuel, it's not true. JetBlue's flights are actually a lot shorter in distance. They fly from White Plains, they fly from New York, they fly from Boston, in comparison to United, who flies to Chicago, American that flies out of Charlotte. Almost a 2,000-mile flight. And so, yeah, in reality, it's those other airlines that are actually taking in more fuel as their distancing is a lot larger. Plus, they're using regional type aircraft. They're using Embraer 195s and Bombardier 550s, Airbus 220s, which were a lot smaller than your standard domestic aircraft, your 737, Airbus 320s, 321s that a lot of the legacy carriers use to fly across the country. And so, yeah, they're a lot smaller in the size of aircraft, so they may not necessarily need as much fuel, but those legs that they're flying, you know, JetBlue doesn't need to, in essence, grab as much fuel as those other airlines do, because those legs that they're flying are a lot shorter to Nantucket. Nantucket's a destination location. It's not an origination airport. And so JetBlue may not necessarily, they might be able to fuel their aircraft full in White Plains, hop across the pond, come here and fly back because their aircraft can handle that. Whereas American would definitely need to take fuel because it's going on a lot longer flight. So again, just want to say hi and just, yeah, iterate again. Thankful for Maria, what she did there, and I'm grateful for her that she's on the team, and thankful for Brian for also giving a good explanation. Like I said, I've been here for 2 months, so I myself am learning. One thing to also note real quick is we are unique in the sense that we do sell fuel. The majority of airports in this country, the FBO services that handle fueling are actually a third party that does those at most airports. And so having Nantucket do this in-house is unique. And so it's just something that I'm learning along the ropes, as this is my first time handling an FBO in my management career. And so more to come, but yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Warren. Thanks a lot. Maria, always nice to see you, and I was happy to put you on the spot to present. That's what you get for leaving us, but we're very happy with Steve. So good. Okay. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Warren. All right. Steve, can you please put up the paper I sent you? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask, I just put some statistics together based on the results from annual town meeting. I'll go quickly through those. And then I'm going to ask if anyone has any additional suggestions as to how we can make town meeting better that I can share with Libby, that I'll take notes and then share with Libby after the fact, and because she couldn't be here today. So summary, there's 104 articles, and within that there was 37 zoning articles. It was a big year for zoning. 39 articles were actually called. Of those, 10 of them were zoning, and 7 out of 10 passed as recommended, whether motion to adopt or motion to take no action, whatever the motion was. 3 failed to pass as recommended, 2 were withdrawn and then therefore passed as recommended, and 2 received positive motions from the sponsor, but did not pass on the day. On the general bylaws, there was 29, and 25 out of 29 passed as recommended. 3 failed to pass, 4 withdrawn, 6 received positive motions from the sponsor but did not pass. For example, the STR articles of 68 and 69. 1 received a positive motion from the sponsor and passed. That was the sewer for the church. And then 1 was amended on town meeting floor and passed, and it originally had a positive motion. The highest number of voters over the 2 days was 789, and it was actually on day number 2. I would have bet it was on day number 1, but there you go. And the lowest number was 227 at the end of day number 2. So that's just a summary of what happened. Now, I will say that, 86% pass rate is obviously good. That means that the recommendations were in line with what the voters anticipated and hoped would happen. A couple big ones did fail, as we know. So, and when I say big ones, it was mostly around the funding topics. Okay, thanks, Steve. And now I'm just going to look for if anyone has any
Sorry,
comment.
can I interrupt for 1 second? Did you,
Sure.
for the airport fuel revolver, did you guys take a vote or was there just a motion?
Oh, I forgot to call everybody. You're right,
Yeah.
Steve. I'll do that. Okay, yes. We have a
Thank
motion to adopt and we had it seconded, but I forgot to do the vote. Thanks, Steve. So you can take this down now
Did the vote.
and I'll do the vote. There we go. Joe,
Aye.
I thought we did vote.
I think we voted.
I said aye.
You
Okay,
did.
Maybe I'm wrong.
It was unanimous.
Okay, sorry.
because I wrote down unanimous, so I thought maybe I just anticipated I wrote unanimous. Okay, all right. So,
That was
okay.
double unanimous.
You're done now. Yeah, it's twice. 2 times the fun. Any comments, questions from the committee as to what could be improved on town meeting? Joe?
Does it make any sense to suggest that the zoning articles all be grouped in one place and that the other articles be grouped in another place? And in other words, there's a period of time which is all zoning and then there's everything else.
So on the warrant, they are grouped that way, so they do show up in a bundle. I think what you're suggesting is maybe day 1 is everything else and day 2 is zoning, because in that way, and that has been discussed before, but I will put that back forward for Libby.
I think one of the dangers of that is you're gonna end up with 12 people at the zoning discussion and 800 at the other one. And I think when you mix them, you tend to get a better show for the
Yeah.
vote.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, or I think zoning is pretty much a sport here, so I think it might be the other way around, Peter. 12 for the others and 800 people at zoning.
I don't know. Maybe.
Is there any way that, I find the process of amending articles, there was one article that was amended materially, and I don't think anybody really knew what the article said after the amendment. And the town spends a fortune to print that document. Is it absolutely, is there a law that says we have to permit amendments?
Yes, I mean, Brian is probably better versed on this than I am, but yes, we do have to consider amendments on town meeting floor. I remember from earlier town meetings where Sarah had suggested, or it was suggested if you had an amendment, she needed it in writing 7 days before, because some of these things could have been sent 7 days before instead of the on the town floor negotiations. And that you had to bring 800 copies so everybody could see what your amendment was. And I find that at least in recent years, and Brian, I'll let you jump in as soon as I finish talking here, is that nobody sticks to that, unfortunately, because it would make it easier on 90% of the amendments. Brian?
I think that anybody, this is probably a question that we wish Libby was here for, but she's the ATM guru. But I believe that anybody can put forth an amendment, but it's up to the moderator to determine whether it's within the scope or not of the article, which is why there's a lot of pre-activity in the run-up to her calling the meeting to order. But I don't believe, or at least I'm unaware of the ability to prohibit suggestions or requests for amendments. I don't, it's up to, as I understand it, it's in this moderator's sole discretion to determine whether it's within the scope of the article or not. And that's the only process we have to limit amendments.
Thank you.
Any other, thank you, Joe, any other observations?
Denise,
Yes, Jeremy?
quite a few people asked me why we can't have somebody from the town actually get up and explain whatever the one warrant is. What's it all about? And I was wondering, just as a, something to think about is, should we have some kind of ombudsman who gets up and says, look, here's what this thing really is. Here's what's for and what's against it, and present it that way, because we all know that people don't read and they don't attend meetings ahead of time to have it explained to them. But quite a few people ask me why we can't do something like that, have it explained. And that it would then cut out a lot of the superfluous discussion that goes on. Anyway, I present that. No action steps today, but something to think about.
Okay, I've written that down for Libby. Thank you. Yeah, there is a wealth of information available ahead of time. Florencia and her does a good job, and I know there's videos out there, and at the same time, communication tends to be it needs to be a pull, meaning people have to go out and access stuff. And, unfortunately, because if people spent a few more minutes clicking around, they'd get a lot of their answers before they go to town meeting. And
I
but if they
completely
don't, they
agree,
don't. That's
but we know they don't. That's the thing.
yeah, if they don't, they don't. And so, I've put this on the list. Okay. But
Denise,
I do want to give the town credit that there is a ton of information.
Without a
running
doubt.
up to
Without a
running
doubt.
up to town meeting.
we could have a couple of paragraphs before the confusing articles in plain speak. It's all written in legal terms and legal words, and I don't think everybody in the audience understands what even if they read it, understands what they're reading. So something small that just concise explains what the actual article we're voting on does, I think would be good. And my other thing would be, these are all the things we said last year. We're just repeating all the same stuff. Sarah needs a button to cut people off, and she should push it when their time's up and they're done.
You need one of those sticks with a crook at the end, or maybe two.
There you go.
Joe, that was before my time. I don't know what those are.
We won't get
That's
into that. Won't get into that. Moving right along. Jill, save us from ourselves.
I just want to make the comment that a lot of these people that stand up and talk, guys, they're going to talk no matter what. A lot of them have the answers. Brian does an incredible job of responding to all sorts of people before town meeting. He does things you have no idea. Denise does too. So many people that respond to and give answers to, and those same people still stand up and they want to demagogue an issue. So there's not a lot we can do about that. And it's not because the town is not making information available. It's just people want to have their moment and their say. So I think we actually don't have as many people stand up as we could, precisely because of the access that people do have to town management, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. A question, I'm curious as to what everyone thought. So on the second night, I felt that we weren't giving an opportunity for both sides of arguments to be discussed, because you'd get a run of one theme and then somebody would call the question and people be left standing at a microphone. So I had asked Sarah and Libby, could we have, here's the people who are for whatever it is, and here's the people who are against whatever it is. So that way she could go back and forth and it was more balanced. And then Caroline stood up, Balzer, and said she felt that made it much more divisive. And I thought it made it more balanced. So I'm curious for this committee to just get your insight. Should they continue doing the for and against microphone system, knowing that people are going to stand up at whatever microphone anyway, honestly, but for the most part, it worked. It worked about 80% of the time. What do you think?
I think that's a good idea. I think people have a hard time following rules, and it's unlikely that people will stick to it. But for the biggest items of the day or evening, I think it would be helpful if you see how many people are for and against something, and try to hear both sides of the debate before the question's called. In not so much this year, but in past years, I've seen a coordinated effort to, rush the mics and then strategically call the question immediately after. So you get very little or sometimes no voice for the other side. Now, and at the same time, I'll say to Jeremy's point about an ombudsman, and here, an unbiased, if there is such a thing, account of what an article is about. I don't think that can work. Certainly not somebody on the town's payroll. I just don't think that that's possible to find that person who can walk into the room with knowledge about everything and without any agenda or preconceived notions about what's the right thing to do. So it's a nice idea that people can be educated on the day, but I also think it's not practical, certainly not as a time-saving mechanism.
Thank you. Rob?
To that point, though, when you were suggesting it, I was thinking, Jeremy, I was thinking more like sometimes when you vote at the polls, there's a yes vote means a no vote means, right? That could potentially go on the warrant, maybe something like that, as opposed to somebody getting up and talking about it and then figuring out, like, how do you make sure that that truly is representative of each of the positions? But that would work. Doesn't it take a 2/3 vote to call the question? Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Yes, it has to pass by 2/3 of the voters in the room at the time.
Yeah, so I'm less concerned about that part of it than you are, Stephen, I think, because if a question gets called, there's opportunity to continue talking about it if people really haven't made up their mind.
I have never seen Rob in all my years at town meeting a call the question fail. So 2/3 doesn't seem to be much of a hurdle. Chris, have you seen it fail? One time? Okay. Jill?
I was just gonna add on to that I really felt like there were some complicated things in that warrant and some things that didn't go the way that our motions went or the planning board's motions went. So I'm kind of impressed with some of those outcomes because I think people know exactly what they're voting for. I think they understand it enough. And I know where I was like, oh, they don't know. But especially on zoning articles, I always say it's the most sophisticated land use electorate possibly in the world, definitely in America. And I think the outcomes show that.
Okay. Anything else? Nope. Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
Denise,
Thanks for that.
Just this part about the pros and cons, typically the select board starts off each of the meetings by having a little speech. And I think that it would be effective if the chair of the select board said, here are the 4 things the select board thinks are the most important votes tonight. If you are, we encourage you to pay attention to these 4 things. I mean, aside from, look at people have come here and they expect the zoning, they expect to approve a budget. But in terms of the rest of the things, if there was a framework that existed where someone could say, please consider carefully these 4 things, and here's the select board's opinion on these 4 things. I think it's too complicated to put it into the warrant, right? And I think it would get lost and add more papers on an already thick document. But if the chair of the select board made their remarks more to what was happening that night, you might get a little bit of traction there.
Okay, I've added that to the list. Thanks, Joanna. Okay. All right, anything else? Okay, moving on, committee reports. Are there any committee reports? Jill, I think Capcom is already kicking off.
Oh, God. We're meeting on Friday. We're just going over to redo our Rory rankings and like the criteria. So we're changing that a little bit to kind of reflect what we're seeing coming up in capital so that people can, give a hopefully more informed answer on their rankings. But we're just sort of rephrasing some of the criteria. So we're doing that on Friday.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, all right, other business. I've resigned from Finance Committee, effective June 30th. It'll be on the select board agenda tomorrow. They better accept it. That's all I can say.
I don't want them to accept it.
You can still change your mind.
I'm not gonna let you. You shouldn't.
Oh, so
What are
there,
you gonna do instead?
I will actually have my second novel coming out, and I didn't promote the first one at all, so that's why it sold all of 4 copies, and I bought 3 of them, so.
I think I read it.
So anyway, so I'll be spending a lot more time on things like that, and it's been an honor to serve with all of you.
An honor to serve under you.
Yes.
If I could just add that I actually think we've had some pretty efficient town meetings. I know it doesn't feel that way because town meetings just doesn't feel efficient, but you've been incredible. I actually incredible. I think things actually did go efficient because of you, and you really kept the trains on time. And I'm really grateful for all the time that you've spent educating me personally, and also for your friendship. But just all the patience you have with the committee. You set a really high bar.
Yeah. I would like to.
I learned so much.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Yes, but Denise, you are one of the most fair and balanced people that I have ever met.
Yeah.
And I
And
really have a lot of respect for you. Thank you.
Oh, I feel like I'm at my own funeral.
Yeah, really. The hardest part is the bar that you set so high is going to be difficult to find someone to replace you.
Well, I'm sure a very capable person will step in. And my offer is there as whoever steps into chair. I've got spreadsheets you're gonna love. You can't even imagine how many spreadsheets I have. Joe?
I asked a question for so that the town says there are 4 openings.
Correct.
Income, and I'm curious, I hope this group stays together to the extent that, other than for Denise and Stephen.
Everybody who's up for reappointment is considered an empty space until the vote.
I know. But my hope is that those who are up, and I'm not sure who it is,
It's Chris and Jill.
re-up. That's my hope, but
Yeah, and then whoever fills my last year, like you did, Joe, for Peter McEachern. You took Peter McEachern's last year. So so that's why there's 4 slots available on Finance Committee. And the applications are due, so if anyone knows of anyone who should be applying, just a reminder, the applications are due Friday at noon. Do not be 1 minute late, Stephen Morey, and as Stephen Morey can attest to what that feels like. The year that he had to re-up and he missed it by 8 hours. So yeah. But it all worked out in the end, so it was good. Yeah.
Back, Denise, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your leadership. And somebody should avail themselves of those spreadsheets. Quite handy.
what's a spreadsheet? I'm
Yeah, Steve,
the post spreadsheet generation.
Okay, there you go. Or the pre-spreadsheet generation, Joe, if I might.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, any other business? Okay, Brian, Steve, thank you very much. Brian's promised me he's not going to call a FinCom meeting every week between now and June 30th, but let's see. So
I don't recall making that promise yet, but
I think I just heard you make it. Oh, that was the other little voice in my head. So, yeah, good. All right, guess what time it is? We have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Yes, they always. This is a zippy group on that. Jill,
Aye.
Joe,
Bye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Steve, and Jeremy.
Aye.
Stephen, Brian, Susan, thank you as always. Support's fabulous. And all right, folks, that's a wrap.
Class
Bye.
dismissed.
Everybody, good night.